the first time I went to Acre was, I think, in '92, and Pesacre, who John discussed, was, and I'm sure Marianne has mentioned, the kind of the early work that Pesacre was doing. I went down with the invitation to start looking at non-timber forest products as an alternative for households in terms of, trying to meeting those constraints or opportunities of sustainable development. So non-timber forest products weren't they were emerging, I think, in some of the literature as a potential way to gain income for households and be socially sustainable and protect or conserve forests. But there wasn't a lot of research being done on it, particularly in Acre at the time. So Marianne had invited me, or actually it was Connie, one of her students, had said, why don't you come down to Acre? So I was doing my master's at American University. So I went down and I did some initial studies collaborating with Pesacre. So that whole Pesacre experience for me was, all my work nearly all the work I've done in Acre has been through Pesacre, either doing research or working on training courses with them or helping them develop different training things or conferences or different interactions with UF. I was down there as a postdoc as well after I finished my PhD. So those experiences were led to many different opportunities, including research. And I want to talk a little bit about today of some of the longitudinal research I'd done in the Chico Mendes Reserve. And again, I know this is a bit repetitive, but the way I was able to work in the reserve was that Connie Campbell had already done work there, and Karen Kiner had already done work there, and really made very good connections with the people in the reserve. So that really opened the door for me when I got introduced to the rubber tappers at a I think it was a cooperative meeting in Chapoury, or maybe it was the meeting of the association, and I was all nervous, going to present my research ideas. And it was through those open doors, right, and those prior experiences that were very positive, I think, for rubber tappers, that made my ability to participate and conduct, nearly 10, 15 years of research there, that made that possible. So, I'm very much appreciative for all the groundwork that was done before I even got there, because it certainly made things easier for me. But what I want to talk about is some research I did in Acre from 1996 until 2006, and so the data is a little bit older. I'm hopeful that another student at UF of Dr. Kiner's, Natalie Cooper, I'm hopeful is going to be going back down to Acre and conducting research with many of the same households that I work with. So we hope to have another opportunity to put, another year of data on the research I'm going to show you now. But what I want you to do as you're looking at this data is think about what this might mean then for conservation and development in the Chico Mendes Reserve. I imagine that Maria de Greci's had the chance to talk to you about some of the creation of the reserve and why it was created and how that kind of emerged from the rubber tappers. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I want to show you some of the data I collected, and then we can think about what does that kind of mean for the future of the reserve. So let me try to put up some slides. So again, I think an important thing to first say is that obviously this is a pretty small group of families I'm working with. So, but anybody that's worked in one of these reserves, I think understands that it's a lot of work to get out there. It certainly was when I started trudging out there in the early mid-1990s, before some of the feeder roads were even built. But these are I worked with, I think, 50 or 60 families total over the time I was there, but 24, I had what I would say, comparable data across these 3 different periods, 1996, 2001, and 2006. And I should also, so I'm going to present data on these families. But I should also say that uh, that I selected them in a purposive way. Like, I wanted families that were in different types of economic situations. So when you go out to the reserve, random sample, don't even think about trying to do that. I think you're setting yourself up for difficulties, if not retooling your whole thesis or dissertation. But so I went out and I worked with families, and I worked with the association and the cooperatives to identify families so I could get a kind of a nice spread of families that would arguably be doing better in terms of their economic situation or financial situation, and those who were struggling a bit more. So this is looking at three different 96, 2001, and 2006. And on the left here, you can see there the types of income, and then across the columns are the years. First of all, there's no consumption data in here, which obviously is very important. In my dissertation in 2001 data, my dissertation indicated that the income from consumption was equal to the income of selling. If we value the animals that they're hunting at a market price that their rubber tappers developed for me. So anyhow, we went through some sessions with them to try to put some values on what a deer was worth if you had the time to put a market value on it. So this data doesn't have that. So beyond what I'm saying here, please remember that there is consumption going on of different types of forest products as well. But this is just kind of trade income and income from different sources. So a few things I want to show here. The reserve, this idea that it's an extractive reserve, and the kind of the conceptual idea was that rubber tappers would utilize these social areas in ways that were meaningful to them, and in ways that were sustainable in terms of not cutting the forest, but also principally through extraction. So they had all these rules that were in place, and that they would do research to try to find out, what other products out there might be potentially possible to exploit. But here we are, 96, a few years after the reserve was established. And then if we look at 2006, then we're at, like at 15 or 16 years after it was established. And we can see some things going on here. First of all, we see that the percent of income from extraction, now this is for those 26 families, right, has dropped. And then we see their large animals, the income from large animals is up. That's principally cattle. Horses could be in there too. There were a few horses that were sold. But there's some other startling things going on too, is that people are starting to work off farm. And I'm going to break this down but that was important. And then we also see, and here you can see 96, as Marianne or Mary have probably discussed, this is right around when the Workers' Party started coming into power. So you can see over this 10 years how rubber tappers was facilitated their ability to capture these retirement payments and social benefits that before they had little access to. So that's why you see in that 10-year period this great increase in retirement payments and social benefits as well. But in that 10 years, so you can see some things going on there. Right? Extractions as a percent of income is falling. And you can also go back, this data is not there, but you can go back to like 1990 or 91 when the Rubber Tappers Council did a study in the reserve. And I think 70% of income at that time was from extraction. So, we're seeing some significant drops in extraction in terms of its role. Although in its value, right, it's held pretty steady. And we'll talk about that in a second. So let me keep moving here. So then what happened with some of these households? So 96 is blue, 2001 is red, and 2006 is yellow. So these are just categories and how many people in these 26 families participated in each of these activities. And it kind of mirrors what we just saw. but tells us how many households now are in that. So we see the number of rubber households participating in rubber has dropped, right? And this is even with price increases. The price of rubber has gone up to a subsidy. Brazil nuts have, kind of families went up, and a little change. A few more families are collecting Brazil nuts. But then you see cattle, off-farm labor, and social income. You see these kind of stair-step jumps in terms of cattle and social income due to what I was just talking about. But here I think you have the number of families that are income from cattle. So in these 10-year periods, so cattle is not now just something to hold on to for, in case you have a crisis in the household. It's no longer kind of a savings. It's turning into a productive strategy. So I think in these 10 years, you see this transitioning, and other papers have said this too. So there's the David Salisbury and Mary Ann's paper talked about this, and there are others that have talked about this. But my research also kind of demonstrates that, and you see these jumps in off-farm labor. So let's go here in terms of how many units of rubber are sold over this period. So here we see this great drop in rubber production, right? And then again, this is with increases in prices. So, rubber is dropping in production. Brazil nuts relatively same. That's probably not unusual because Brazil nuts have kind of always kind of had a stronger price. And also you wouldn't expect it to go up a lot because there's a limited supply kind of Brazil nuts out there, right? The people can't react to an increase in market price necessarily by selling more Brazil nuts. Here we can look at cattle. Again, the 96 data I have, I didn't use. I didn't feel I had enough data for all the households, so I just dropped it out. But again, we see some of these same kind of cattle trends from 2001 to 2006. And I think this one in the middle is interesting, this average head of cattle per household with cattle. So people, again, are increasing the number of cattle they're holding. And again, we saw that that's a market-oriented strategy now. And then the number of hectares of pasture per household is increasing. So again, 2001 to 2006, we're seeing these trends emerging. And again, these have been a good friend of mine. I don't know, has Valerio Gomez appeared on the course? He certainly has done a lot of research in cattle, as Jeff Hawley has. So, those guys have a much better grasp of this information, but I was trying to capture a bit about household income and what people are doing in terms of strategies to diversify. So then this was another interesting thing about the skilled labor. So here you have there's twice as many families are now in the skilled labor market from this period. And they're capturing a lot of income from this. And skilled labor is things like, okay, I'm a school teacher, I'm a carpenter, I've been hired to build houses, or I'm a health assistant, those types of professional positions that are giving more income. And then the unskilled labor could be like, helping a family crack Brazil nuts, or, going and working a diario, a day of labor on another land holding, or things like that were unskilled. So you see increases in both, but where you really see these jumps in income are those households who have some education, right? And are able to capture in the ability to integrate into these kind of market positions where there are, this, and again, this is the same time when the workers' parties has come into power. So there's investments in these kind of social aspects of development in the reserve. So building more homes, right, or improving the household, the home structures, and maybe putting schools in these health units into the forest. So changes. Now, what I want to do quickly for just a few more slides is show some of the difference between those households who have a high income per capita and those at a low income per capita. And now we're getting pretty small in terms of my sample size. So, bear with me with that. But what I wanted to see is if are are people doing different things if their financial condition are different? So what I also did was took out families that had some type of social income. So if you were retired, or if there was somebody retired in the household, or somebody received some other income from some other source that wasn't productive but social, I took them out because I thought, like, well, that could maybe influence the strategy of how a household might invest labor. So let's take a look at a couple of these. So here we have, what's the value of rubber sales by higher and lower income per capita households over these 3 periods? So the blue is the higher income per capita. And there, it's a pretty clear pattern there, right? The higher income per capita households are leaving rubber extraction, but the lower per capita income households are sticking with it, right? So that says something. How about this? The value of extractive products for higher and lower income per capita. So this would also include Brazil nuts. Similar trend, right? You see the higher income per capita households leaving extraction. The lower per capita income, actually, you know, they're gaining more from extraction. So then we see cattle. So this is, again, you see this, the higher income per capita households increasing their income from cattle. The lower, also though, you see even the kind of the lower per capita income households are entering into that market for cattle. That definitely suggests we're now at I think, an income earning strategy, this investment strategy. This is not just for future health problems of a child, or, you know, as a savings tool. And then we can look at value of off-farm labor from high income and lower productive households. So then again, we see these higher income per capita households are able to get themselves into these off-farm labor markets. And, you know, the ones that are certainly transformative are the ones where they can get an income, right? Like if they're working at a school, or working at a health agent with the health agency in the forest, or as a carpenter. That was another pretty good income earner for families. So then I'm 4 slides and try to pull this together. So I just wanted to kind of look at, okay, let's look at the families over these 3 years and try to see if we can see what's happening in terms of looking at the same household over time. So it's pretty messy here, but nonetheless, I tried to see if we can see anything in here. And this is really interesting because the households that actually were gaining the highest income from rubber left. I mean, that certainly suggests they found other things to do with their time and investment. So, and then there's just kind of some that have increased a little bit, but others who are at the bottom, you know, here that are staying relatively even in terms of their rubber sales. Now let's look at cattle. You know, I've kind of parsed them out, what I thought were kind of 3 different trajectories here. And certainly there's some that are way up there in terms of, you know, they had a lot of cattle in 2001, and they have a few more now. But then you see these other this other increase in this middle group, and even you know, this little buffering down here, but not much. Some people are holding pretty steady at what they had over that 5-year period. And then here we see this off-farm income, and this is where there's some transformational you know, opportunities taking place. This is bringing a lot of income into households. So these households are obviously able to afford, you know, maybe motorcycles. They're able to, you know, probably now, you know, easily afford better cell phones. So that leads to a lot of different ways of connectivity, opens open doors for other opportunities where, you know, if your income, if you don't have maybe those connections or the education, maybe that limits you in a way in terms of your ability to network or to potentially increase. So almost like these people up here, it's almost this kind of a multiplier, right? In terms of maybe creating even new opportunities from the connections, from the higher incomes. So I'll leave it at that. And I have some ideas of what this might mean. I recently wrote a paper with Valeria Gomez, who who went to UF, and Natalie Cooper, who's a current student there, about what we see as kind of these trajectories of NTFPs and cattle and even timber management now. But I think I'll leave it at that, and maybe you guys have some thoughts or discussions about it. But I think certainly we see the Chico Mendes Reserve now needing to accommodate different income earning strategies. And I think that's probably not going to be an easy debate to have, and it'll be a tough one to deal with. But maybe I'll turn it over for you guys to have some comments or discussions, and leave it at that.